Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Josh, and in this week's Wednesday watch list, we are going to be recapping the latest episode of The Traitors. And we're also going to be discussing the trailer for the upcoming Netflix show, The Electric State. And then we're also going to be discussing the trailer for the Fantastic Four. And then we're going to wrap things up by discussing Dune Prophecy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on in to the recap of the latest episode of The Traitors. So episode 6 picks up right where episode 5 left off, and we see the Traitors in the turret, and they have to collectively decide who they're gonna murder. Carolyn starts right off by coming straight for Danielle, and she is coming for Danielle because she has just found out that Danielle has been throwing her name around and is essentially throwing her under the bus to the other people in the game. And she is pretty much saying that she thinks Carolyn is a traitor. So Carolyn comes straight out the woodwork and says, "Danielle, why have you been throwing my name around?" And Danielle initially says that she hasn't really been throwing her name around and that she hasn't really been meaning to throw her name around. And then when Carolyn confronts her even more on this, she says, "Well, you never let me know about Jeremy." So then after this, Carolyn just comes right out and says that she doesn't trust Danielle nor Rob because of everything that's happened, and she doesn't trust Rob because of how he handled the whole Bob the Drag Queen situation when he blindsided both her and Danielle and didn't even consult them before he just made a beeline straight for Bob the Drag Queen at the round table. And she, of course, no longer trusts Danielle because Danielle has been throwing her under the bus. Moving forward to breakfast, the group members start filing into the dining room. And initially, some of the group members start to talk about the fact that they are sort of suspicious of Rob, again, because of how he handled the whole Bob the Drag Queen situation, and that the whole situation just seems a little fishy to them. And then Ciara says that she is actually suspicious of Danielle because Danielle has just been acting a little bit over the top, and that she's been crying after finding out who gets murdered every single time, and that her reactions just don't seem sincere and that they seem a little bit over the top. Moving forward, all the group members have filed into the dining room, and we find out that Bob H is who the Traitors have decided to murder tonight. After this, Derek and Wes get together and they start concocting a plan to gather up votes to vote Rob off the show because both of them are suspicious of Rob. Moving forward to the game of the episode, the game the group has to play this episode is a game in which they have to shovel gunpowder out of crates that are located throughout the forest in order to take down a massive traitor statue. Now, if they successfully take down this traitor statue, they will add $30,000 to the prize pot. However, there are two caveats with this game. The first of which is that there are shields available. There are 3 shields available in 3 different crates in this game. And the second caveat is that if the group does not collectively fill the barrel with enough gunpowder, they will not successfully take down the traitor. So it's kind of like a race against the time sort of game. Now, immediately off the bat, Wes makes it loud and clear that he wants to get a shield because he mentioned Rob's name out loud at breakfast. Again, he feels like Rob is a traitor, so he feels like Rob is going to come after him, so he wants a shield for his own protection. Moving forward, Carolyn is the first person in the group to get a shield. Her and Tom both open a crate, and she immediately snatches the shield right out of the crate, and Tom is kind of taken aback by this because he's like, "Well, I also want the shield," but Carolyn's like, "No, I got it first, I'm keeping it, I need this more than you do." The next person to get a shield in the group is Chriselle. And while the group is playing this game, Carolyn gets made aware of the fact that Danielle has apparently still been throwing out her name, even though earlier in the episode when Carolyn confronted Danielle on this, Danielle said that she would stop throwing out Carolyn's name and that she would try and fix the situation and try and not make people suspicious of Carolyn anymore. And so when Carolyn finds out about this just enrages her, and she's like, "We're done. I'm not working with her anymore." Moving forward to the end of the game, the group has successfully gathered enough gunpowder to blow up the massive traitor, meaning that they have successfully added $30,000 to the prize pot. Now, the host of the game also takes the time to ask who got a shield, and nobody reveals who got a shield. Now, we know that both Carolyn and Chriselle got a shield, but it's never revealed if anybody got the 3rd shield or not, so I'm assuming that nobody got the 3rd shield. And then in the car ride back to the castle, Carolyn is sitting right next to Danielle, and she is pretty much just ignoring her the whole car ride. Once we get back to the castle, Derek starts going around to people trying to rally up votes and get people on board with him to vote out Rob. Now, this leads him to start suspecting Brittany, because when he floats this idea to Brittany, she kind of is like, no, I don't want to necessarily do that. And she says that his evidence just isn't good enough. And this makes Derek suspect that Brittany might also be a traitor, because Brittany has never come forward and said that she is suspicious of Rob. She's always come to the defense of Rob, and she's never really been open-minded to the fact that he might be a traitor, which makes Derek suspicious that both of them are traitors. Ironically, this also makes Brittany suspicious of Derek, because he has been rallying against Rob so hard that she finds it a bit weird that he is coming after Rob so concretely and so evidently. And when she confronts him on this, she's like, well, I've heard you're going against Rob. He's like, well, that's not totally true, but it's also not false. Just the way he explains it to her, it just really makes her suspicious of him. So they're both now suspicious of each other. Derek then goes to Danielle and floats the idea of voting for Rob to her, in which he says she doesn't know, but she's not really like saying no to the idea. She is pretty much open-minded to the idea. Moving forward, throughout the episode, Dolores has been hearing that Tom has been throwing her name out and about. And so at the round table, Dolores immediately opens up and starts us off and comes hard for Tom Sandoval. She immediately says, you know, I've been hearing you have been throwing my name out, and I'm just going to lay it out flat and simple. And here's why you're wrong, and here's why I will never take advice from you again, and here's why I don't think anyone should take advice from you. She pretty much embarrasses the heck out of him in front of the entire group. After that, Derek immediately takes over and immediately comes for Rob and lays out his entire theory as to why Rob is a traitor. He goes right back to his main point of evidence, which is that before Bob the drag queen left, he called out Rob and said that, no, actually, you're a traitor. And Derek says that he just found the fact that Rob was so 100% sure that Bob the drag queen was a traitor a little bit suspicious, and he's harping on the fact that no one can really know for sure if someone's a traitor unless they too are a traitor. He also says that it's mighty funny how after Bob the drag queen simply said that he thinks one of the traitors is one of the 3 new guys that was up in the cages, how Rob immediately said that they needed to go after Bob the drag queen. He finds all of this to be suspicious, and that's his main evidence as to why he thinks Rob is a traitor. Immediately after this, Rob says that he was just, again, sure that Bob the drag queen was a traitor just because of the way he was acting. And then after this is when Carolyn immediately floats the idea that she thinks Danielle is a traitor. She comes out and says that she's only had one really true ally throughout this whole game, and she thought it was Danielle, but upon hearing that Danielle has been throwing her name out, she doesn't trust Danielle anymore, and she thinks that Danielle is a traitor. And an argument kind of starts between the two. During this, Rob jumps in and says that, actually, no, Carolyn, you're wrong. It hasn't been Danielle who's been causing chaos. It has been Wes. He says that Wes has been throwing out people's names the entire game, and that he has been causing chaos, and that he is suspicious that Wes is a traitor. So immediately upon this, Wes immediately gives his defense and says that he also thinks that Rob is a traitor simply because of how the whole Bob the drag queen thing went down at the round table, and that if anyone votes for him, he's going to have their eye on them, which pretty much raises the red flags of the entire group. Immediately after he says this, people from the group start speaking out against Wes and saying that that is very traitor-like behavior to say you're going to have your eye on somebody simply because they vote for you. Moving forward to the vote, people immediately start voting for Rob, and then eventually it turns over to Wes, and then Wes is eventually voted off of the show. So a couple notable things happen during the vote, one of which is the fact that Carolyn voted for Danielle, again because Carolyn is really peeved at the fact that Danielle has been throwing her name out there. Danielle also decides to go along with Derek's plan and votes for Rob in an effort to try and get him out of the show. And then initially we almost had a tie in this episode between Wes and Rob. However, Ciara was the tie-breaking vote, and she unfortunately voted for Wes. After Wes has occurred the most amount of votes in the group, he is then voted off the show, and during his testimony he of course tells the group that he has been a faithful. After this, we then see the traitors make their way to the turret, and then once they take their hoods off, they all pretty much again do what they did at the beginning of this episode, where they're all just kind of standing and staring at each other because they're all just really peeved at each other. So right off the bat, Rob immediately just kind of comes after Danielle and is like, Danielle, why are you still calling Carolyn out and throwing her under the bus, and why did you vote for me? And Danielle says that she has felt paranoid in the group ever since Rob went after Bob the drag queen, and that she hasn't felt safe. So that's been pretty much her logic for not only throwing Carolyn under the bus, but also voting for Rob at the round table. But Rob is just like, I don't know what we need to do at this point because we're not getting along and this is the worst group of traitors. And he says that he doesn't know what they should do or how they're going to fix this. After which, Carolyn says that they just need to go after Danielle because she's the one causing the chaos in this group and that they need to vote her out. Danielle, of course, says that she's not going to take this easy and that she's going to bring the fight right to Carolyn. And Carolyn is like, how are you going to do this with lies? And Danielle's like, no, I'm just going to tell them the truth. And that is where the episode ends. So my thoughts on this episode. Firstly, I have just got to agree with Rob. I definitely think that, yeah, this is by far the worst group of traitors I think has been on the show since, at least like for Traitors USA. I've never seen Traitors UK, but I definitely would have to agree with Rob. I think this is definitely like the worst group of traitors I've ever seen because there's so much infighting and just conflict within this group of traitors that it's just like they're not functioning as a unit. They're kind of just all in it for their own personal interests. And on a show like this, when it's a small group of you against a larger group, you all really need to stick together. So this infighting isn't really helping anyone and it's all sort of just hurting them because at this point, all of their names have been thrown out and a lot of people are aware of the fact that they all pretty much suspect each other. Danielle has been saying that she's suspicious of Carolyn. You have Carolyn then saying that she's suspicious of Danielle. You have Danielle voting for Rob at the round table. So all of this infighting is just creating chaos among not only the larger group, but also the traitors. Which in last week's episode, I also discussed this, how in a game like this, you have to really focus on strategy and how when the traitors start fighting amongst themselves, it's pretty much like a loser's game at this point. Like none of the traitors are really going to win because they're all fighting amongst each other. And Carolyn has said that she doesn't trust Rob or Danielle. Danielle has said that she doesn't trust Carolyn or Rob. So all this infighting has just led to none of the three traitors trusting each other. Another thing with this episode, there are a lot of names getting thrown up at the round table. We heard Wes's name getting thrown out. We heard Tom's name getting thrown out. We heard Dolores' name getting thrown out. We heard Carolyn's name getting thrown out. We heard pretty much like half of the group's name got thrown out tonight at the round table. So I'd have to say, even though the traitors are like, this is like the worst group of traitors I've seen on the show, it is kind of working in the sense that nobody in this group is like 100% confirmed or set on one person. They all are sort of suspecting each other, mainly because of how the traitors are acting. And because there's this infighting, they're all coming after each other, so it's not really clear as to who's aligned with who. Going back to my point earlier, in a game like this, you really have to focus on strategy. And so I feel like this all could have been avoided if Danielle didn't throw out Carolyn's name. Because the initial plan was, after Rob blindsided Carolyn and Danielle by gunning after Bob the drag queen at the round table, Carolyn and Danielle both spoke to each other and said that they felt unsafe and that they should kind of work together to take down Rob. That plan got absolutely thrown out the window when Danielle started throwing out Carolyn's name. Looking forward to how, again, I think this whole thing is going to end. I think all this infighting within the traitors, I don't think this is going to lead to anything productive. I think unless Carolyn and Rob team up at this point and they work together to get Danielle off the show, or unless Danielle and Carolyn somehow make amends, which I don't think they're going to do, I don't see how any of the traitors are really going to win this. The only way I really see this working is they're just going to have to start voting each other out because, again, none of the three traitors are getting along. They're all fighting with each other. I think at this point, again, they're just going to have to start voting each other out. That's the only really way to fix this situation, is one of these traitors is going to have to get voted out in the next episode, and then the two left are just going to have to stick it out and make it work. Now, moving forward to the Fantastic Four trailer, I have watched the trailer for the upcoming Fantastic Four movie, and I think the trailer looks pretty good. I have to say, I really like the visuals. I like the retro futuristic approach that they're taking with this movie. I also really like the cast of this movie, and I also like how they teased Galactus in the trailer. Now, my biggest question is how they're going to tie all of this into the main MCU storyline, especially given the fact that they're introducing a villain as big as Galactus into this. I think that that is a really big deal, and again, we know that all of this is going to eventually lead to Avengers Doomsday, in which the Avengers are going to have to to fight Doctor Doom. So I'm just sort of curious as to how they're going to really tie all this together. That being said, I am looking forward to going to see this movie. Overall, it has piqued my interest. I think that this is a good sign, and I think it's a sign that the MCU might be getting back on the right track, especially given the recent blunders that it's put out. Moving forward, Netflix has also released the trailer for their upcoming show, The Electric State, which is loosely based on the novel of the same name by Simon, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but Simon Stollenhag. A couple years ago, I heard that this novel was getting an adaptation at Netflix, and upon hearing this, I was a little bit optimistic because Netflix has, in its past, put out some really good sci-fi shows. They put out shows like Black Mirror, Altered Carbon, VOA, and Love, Death, and Robots. However, upon seeing the trailer for this show, I have to be honest with you, I am a little bit disappointed, and I say that because I feel like this show isn't really sticking to the original novel's aesthetic or just overall look at all. In the novel, there are a couple graphics and pictures that are put in this novel. It's a graphic novel that give the reader a clear look as to what this world looks like and sort of the aesthetic of this world and sort of the vibes. And you can find these pictures online simply by Googling the name of this novel, and it'll come up with all these pictures. However, I have to say, they did keep like the overall design for the robots. However, the sort of aesthetic, I feel like it's been lost in translation. The majority of people in the general audience, like upon seeing the trailer for this movie, they're gonna think like it's a Netflix original movie and that Netflix is like the ones who came up with this. I don't think if you show this trailer to anyone who didn't know that this was based on a novel, that they would think that this is based on anything else. I think that they would just think that this is like an original Netflix idea and that this is just like a new IP that they're coming up with. It just to me seems like they lost the original like art design and just overall look that is established in this graphic novel. I also think casting Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt in this, that has me really just worried about this. Like as soon as I heard Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown were in this, I was immediately like worried. And I say that because they're just in a lot of things. They're in a lot of Netflix things. And I feel like while they're not bad actors, I just feel like they give like a very generic, middle of the road, like I'd say like C tier performance in most things that they have on Netflix. And I'm not saying that it's their fault. I'm just saying that when Netflix works with these actors, it just seems like their performances are just very, again, middle of the road, and they're not really anything outstanding. I just feel like Netflix should have went with some different actors, and they also should have really stuck close to the source material of this, because again, to me, this just looks like every other Netflix movie that's come out over the past 5 years. Again, this just feels like more Netflix slop, to be honest with you. Like it just feels like another Netflix movie they're putting out with, you know, big A-list stars to grab the headlines, and then after that it's going to muddle out into nothing. I'm just not really looking forward to it as much as I initially was upon hearing that it was getting greenlit by Netflix. Overall, though, I definitely will be checking it out, but I have to say, like, given just how little Netflix has given, like, us sci-fi lovers in recent years, I have to say, like, Netflix, please don't ruin this. I'm okay with you loosely adapting the source material, and I'm okay with it looking a little bit different than the source material, but please actually make this like a genuinely good story, and don't make this just another like C tier, oh, it's cool for the first week you watch it, and then after that, everybody forgets the plot story that you've been putting out for the past 5 years at this point. And I really wish Netflix would tap into what they had going on pre-COVID, where we had, again, shows like Altered Carbon, Black Mirror, VOA, Dark. I would like to see more shows like that come out from Netflix rather than what we're getting now, which is just, again, generic middle of the road content. And then the last topic for this week's Wednesday watch list is Dune Prophecy. I believe I talked about this in an earlier video, but Dune Prophecy is getting renewed for a second season, and I have to say that I'm really looking forward to the next season of Dune Prophecy. Now, I've seen a lot of people online talk about how this show is boring and how it's dull and how it doesn't really need a second season, and how, given its viewership, it doesn't really deserve a second season. And I have to say that all of y'all who are hating on the show, at this point, y'all are just gonna have to deal with it. Like, I'm sorry, but again, as somebody who loves sci-fi movies and shows, this really just piqued my interest. I really like the aesthetic of Dune. I really like the lore of Dune. And so a show like this just fits right into my alley, and I feel like there is a big enough audience out there. It's definitely not like as big as the audience that goes to see the Dune movies, but I definitely feel like there is like a certain niche in that audience that is into a show like this. So I'm really glad to see that HBO is indeed giving the show a second season. Again, I feel like the way the first season has ended, it revealed a lot of questions got answered, and I'm really looking forward to see how HBO is going to, you know, sort of connect this more to the main Dune storyline. But that is going to be it for this week's Wednesday watch list. I just want to thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye!